Morning, True, Ta, Lofa, Malo, Alele, Adarahi, Namona, Mogathin. It's really good to be here with all of you this morning. Thank you for so many of you for coming along to this session on Starlink's arrival and changes to communication in the Pacific Islands region. And thanks also to those who are joining us online or watching the recording later. Amanda is my name, Dr. Amanda Watson, and I am a researcher here in the Department of Pacific Affairs at the Australian National University, and it's wonderful to be sharing with you about our latest research on the entry of a new satellite communication provider into the Pacific Islands region. This session will be about an hour and a half long. We'll have 3 talks from people who've been doing research on satellites in the Pacific, and then we'll have a discussion time where you'll have time to ask questions of the 3 speakers. So if you do have questions as they're talking, please note them down in the corner of your notebook, and we will certainly come to you after the 3 presentations. For those watching us online, feel free to contact me later, Amanda Watson at ANU. You should be able to find my contact details later easily if you have a question. So our first speaker is Dr. Atishnal Elvin Chand. He is a postdoctoral fellow at the University of New South Wales here in Canberra, and he's going to be speaking first about communications satellite access in the Pacific. Our second speaker is in the middle over here, and I'm very pleased that the Pacific Research Program funding was able to bring her from Samoa to join us here for this panel. Her name is Ms. Polataivao Fiafaitupe, Tuiloma, Lafaele, and she says we can call her Tupe. Tupe is a lecturer or instructor at the National University of Samoa. And our third speaker is Dr. Aleksandar Deejay, and he lets us call him Alex, and he has flown up here from Melbourne, again with Pacific Research Program funding, to talk about our research in Tonga. So it's wonderful to have this panel here, and I do want to just finally acknowledge before I hand over to Atishnal that much of this research, not all of it, but much of this research has been funded by the Pacific Research Program, and we're very grateful for that. So as I said, after the speakers, we'll have time for your questions, and please note them down during the presentations. Would you help me in making Atishnal feel very welcome?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Atishnal and I am originally from Fiji. I've been living here in Canberra for the past 4 years. And today I'll be talking about communication satellite access in the Pacific. So before starting my presentation, I want to give some details about this project. This project was funded by Pacific Research Program. And I have conducted this research last year with Dr. Amanda Watson's supervision. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Part of this work has been published in the conversation, and the main findings we have submitted in the peer review journal, which is under review. Therefore, please do not share the figures and all. If you need to share, please ask permission from us. So the main research objective was to map the communication satellite access across Pacific Island countries and to identify different communication satellite service providers, analyze Starlink growth across Pacific Island countries, and provide policy insights. So you can see this photo, which was taken by my friend Paul Bassen from Vanuatu. You can see my friend's friend Solomon is adjusting the Starlink kit or antenna at his residence in Vanuatu. So I would like to emphasize that the Starlink provides direct customer service. And if you are not aware with like the satellite antenna, so this is how it looks like. I have not seen it. I have not seen a physical version of the Starlink kit yet. So methodology, we focus these studies on the Pacific Island Forum countries, excluding Australia and New Zealand, because in Australia and New Zealand we have advanced telecommunication infrastructure. So we have focused only on 16 Pacific Island Forum member countries, as you can see here, excluding Australia and New Zealand. The main findings were based on literature on internet access only, meaning that we did not approach any satellite providers, and all the informations that we gathered are available in the public domain, and such as the media releases by government and companies, news articles, technical reports, and research papers. We tried to verify all of our information using at least 2 independent sources. So let me give a quick background on the different types of satellite systems. There are 3 main satellite systems, GEO, MEO, and LEO. GEO refers to geostationary orbit satellites. They are quite high in the sky, around 35,000 kilometers. They provide large coverage, and they have high latency. And some of the examples of GEO satellites are like television satellites, weather satellites, and Pacific One satellite. MEO refers to middle earth orbit satellites. They are in the medium altitude, around 2,000 to 35,000 kilometers. They provide medium coverage, and they have around medium latency. Example, GPS satellite, O3B mPOWER, which is owned by SES. And LEO refers to low Earth orbit satellites. They are situated around low altitude, between 160 to 2,000 kilometers. And they provide small range of coverage, and they have low latency. Low latency means that the data transfer is quite fast with very little time delay. Example, Starlink and OneWeb. LEO systems are transforming connectivity in the Pacific due to the low latency and the flexibility. So this slide shows the communication satellite provided in the Pacific. You can see all of the providers in the table, but there are only 3 key or the common satellite providers in the Pacific. The first one is the Pacific One, which is a geostationary satellite, which provides a regional broadband coverage to government and private sectors in the Pacific Island countries. O3B mPOWER, which is a MEO satellite system owned by SES, acts as a telecom backbone. And the third one, most of you know, is the Starlink. It provides direct service to the customers, and it is a very fast growing internet provider in the Pacific Island countries. So these are the 3 main providers in the satellite internet providers in the Pacific that we found out. There are a few others like ABS6, Horizon 3E, Intercept, and NSS9. They are also owned by SES, but they are not available in most of the countries, Pacific Island countries. So Starlink was first launched sometimes in 2019, and O3B mPOWER was launched in 2022, and the Pacific One satellite was launched in 2019 also along with the Starlink. So this slide shows the table mapping. I mapped the satellite internet provider with respect to the Pacific Island for member countries. So you can see that they are uneven distribution, and if you look at the table carefully, then you can see Solomon Island and Tonga, they have multiple providers, and there are some countries such as New Caledonia, they are not relying on the satellite internet providers, and there are some countries such as there are some Marshall Islands. In Marshall Islands, only Starlink is available. So I have some more figures which provide a better representation of the mapping that I did. So I will show you guys in my next slide. So in this slide, I have mapped the three main satellite internet providers with respect to the Pacific Island countries. So the orange refers to the O3B mPower satellite owned by SAS. The blue one refers to the Caspic one, and the red one refers to the Starlink. So you can see that New Caledonia, as I have already mentioned, that in New Caledonia, none of these satellites providers are available. In Marshall Islands, only Starlink is available, and in Palau, Palau is using O3BMB service in Palau, and in other countries like rest of the countries, they have at least two to three of these satellite internet providers. So in this slide, I have presented the Starlink. I have presented Starlink rollout stages across the Pacific Island countries. So you can see the red bar refers, the red symbol refers to means that it's not launched. The yellow one means it's government approved. The green one means it's launched. So there are only 4 countries where Starlink is not yet launched, and these countries are French Polynesia, New Caledonia, Palau, and PNG. So in these 4 countries, Starlink is not yet launched, and for other countries, the Starlink is either government approved or it is launched. So green one refers to that Starlink is launched, and the yellow one says it is government approved. So there was a latest development, I think last few weeks. So when I did the research in New, the Starlink was not launched, but I think recently one new government has approved the usage of Starlink service in New. So in this slide, I am presenting the Starlink authorized resellers and retailers in the Pacific region. So resellers means that resellers can sell the Starlink service and equipment. Retailers means that they can only sell the equipment. So if you look at this table, you can see that there are only 5 countries. Those are like Fiji, Vanuatu, Samoa, Solomon Island, and Tonga. So in these 5 countries, only the Starlink resellers and retailers are available. And in most of the countries, the resellers and retailers of Starlink are not available. So in countries where the Starlink resellers and retailers are not available, then if people need to use the Starlink, then they have to order it from the Starlink website. They have to directly order, which I think is a bit expensive if you due to the shipment cost and all. So in this slide, I will be presenting some of the real world impact of communication satellite in the Pacific Island countries. So when I was doing literature review and research, I found that Starlink has connected remote schools in Fiji and Solomon Islands. There were few, if you look at these news articles by Fiji Sun, it says solar power Starlink connectivity brings new life to Serval schools. And there were also, I think Starlink also connected some rural schools in Solomon Islands, and it's improved the educational access in these schools. The Starlink has also improved the communication and the internet access in the rural community in Nauru and FSM due to the installation of the community gateway. And Starlink has also contributed a lot to the disaster response. For example, in Vanuatu, in December 2024, there was an earthquake, 7.3 magnitude earthquake, and I have seen in the news articles and from my friends that Starlink was a game changer in Port Vila. So when the earthquake occurred, some people they installed the Starlink kit in the Port Vila town. So with the help of that Starlink, people were able to connect with their families, and Vanuatu was also connected with the rest of the world. And also during Tonga 2022 volcano eruptions, Starlink also played a huge role in terms of connecting Tonga to the rest of the world. So, yep. And also I heard in the news that Starlink links one of the remote village in Vanuatu, which was without internet for 1 year for 1 year. So you can see this news article. It says by I think Vanuatu Daily Post, Starlink links Polataivao village and years of isolation. And in this news article, you can see Nauru switches to Starlink community gateway internet access. So Starlink and the other communication satellite, they are really transforming how the internet connectivity works in the Pacific. So in this slide, I will discuss some of the policy consideration for satellite connectivity in the Pacific. We are proposing that we need to have the hybrid connectivity model, meaning that we need to integrate satellite plus undersea cables. We shouldn't like satellite and undersea cables should not be seen as competing technologies, rather complementary systems for resilience. And one of the major issues that we have seen from the news articles and all is that there is a regulatory uncertainty, especially among the new technologies, new imaging technologies such as Starlink. Like countries are at different stages, like you have seen in some of my figures. Like some countries are like government approved, in some countries it is launched, and in some countries it is not launched. And I think there is also an opportunity for regional coordination through the Pacific Island Forum wide regulatory framework, where Pacific Island Forum can harmonize the licensing process and all, so that we can have a clear licensing approval process. And one of the concerns that I found is from the public and the government is the cybersecurity and data sovereignty. And there need to be more research and more work done to protect the data transmitted by the foreign operator systems. And also there should be equitable access to ensure affordability and inclusion for remote and rural communities. So in summary, we have seen uneven satellite access across the Pacific Island countries. Starlink is transforming the region. Around 75 countries have either government approved or already launched in those countries. And region is moving towards a hybrid connectivity model. That means they are using GEO, MEO, and LEO satellites. And satellites play a critical role in remote connectivity, education access, and disaster response and resilience. But however, there is still a policy gaps in regulation, pricing, and long-term sustainability. Therefore, we need a future research on user experience and adaptation, pricing and affordability, regulatory impacts, and dependency risks. So, thank you everyone for listening. And as I already mentioned, part of this work has been published in the conversation. So you can scan the barcode to read our article on that. And if you guys have any questions, so feel free to ask me now. Yes, so the floor is all yours.
Oh, we'll take all the questions together at the end, I think.
No worries.
Yeah. So let's give Atishnal a hand. Thank you. We'll take all the questions at the end, sorry. Yes, so that piece is in the conversation. It should be fairly easy to find if you missed the QR code. But thanks, Atishnal, for giving us that framing. So would you all please give me a hand in welcoming Tupe up here to share her presentation about the research we did in Samoa. And I've handed out copies. Come on up. I've handed out copies to some of you. There's more printouts here. And please make Tupe feel welcome.
E moa ai whaatalofa atu I le paia ma le mamalu o Samoa o poto. Ma alo le soifua lau lei ma le langi a mama. A o le isopoloa se manatu I le nei tu lau le aso. O te whaatulau atu a wae whaingata o e Samoa o le au mamala. Tulou na lava. Ta alofa lava and warm Pacific greetings to everyone here. It's an honor to speak with you today on behalf of our research team, Dr. Amanda Watson, Professor Yana Jen Mao, who's not here, and Dr. Aleksandar Deejay, about a topic that touches every Samoan household, connectivity. In our culture, the va'a, or the canoe, carries us across vast oceans. In the same way, connectivity carries Samoa across the digital ocean. So today, I will share the story of how Starlink's entry into Samoa became, how it unfolded, why it matters, and how we must steer this digital va'a wisely for our people. For years, Samoa's internet has been costly, limited, and unreliable, especially outside Apia, that's our town. The government has responded with a digital transformation strategy and a cybersecurity framework to strengthen our systems. At the same time, a new player entered the global market, Starlink. Now, Starlink is a satellite internet service created by SpaceX, owned by the well-known Elon Musk. Now, instead of relying on cables or towers, Starlink uses thousands of low Earth orbit satellites to deliver fast internet almost anywhere on Earth, including remote villages that traditional infrastructure struggles to reach. In this context, satellite internet, particularly Starlink, emerged as a new hope, promising fast, affordable access even in remote villages. Now let's look at how this journey unfolded. And before I move to the next slide, I want to say that the photo in the background was taken by myself. That's actually my eldest son setting up Starlink on our home. In Samoa, the situation changed very quickly. Starlink was banned in January 2024, but by January 2025, it was fully approved. Even during the restriction period, more than 100 users were already active, showing how strong the demand for better connectivity really was. These rapid shifts created an uncertain regulatory environment, and that's the context that shaped our research aim. The main aim of this research was to examine how policy developments surrounding Starlink were communicated to the public in Samoa. Now, rather than focusing on the technology itself, we wanted to understand how information was shared and how clear it was. We used a qualitative media analysis approach, reviewing media content over a one-year period from January 2024 to January 2025. We examined major media outlets in Samoa, including both private and government sources, as well as official notices from the Office of the Regulator. And in total, 31 relevant media items were analyzed. This allowed us to track how information was communicated over time and identify patterns in messaging and clarity. The goal was to assess how Starlink's regulation was communicated to the public and whether consumers received clear guidance. Now, with our approach established, we can now step through the key events that shaped this case. In January 2024, Starlink was banned and users were instructed to stop using the service. On 22nd of March 2024, the Samoa Observer reported that Cabinet had approved Starlink. This created significant public interest and some confusion. More than 2 weeks later, the Office of the Regulator clarified that the approval mentioned in the article referred only to a specific project supporting connectivity for schools and health centers, not a general approval for Starlink's operation. From April to July 2024, public understanding remained mixed. Starlink devices continued circulating informally, and many people were unsure about what was permitted. In August 2024, enforcement actions intensified. The regulator warned that unregistered Starlink units would be disconnected and that users risked penalties if they did not bring devices in for registration. Late 2024, negotiations continued, and Starlink remained widely discussed but not yet licensed. And finally, on the 11th of January 2025, the government announced Cabinet approval, releasing pricing in Samoan Tala and named local resellers and retailers, marking Starlink's official entry into Samoa. This progression of events reveals the themes that underpin our findings. Our monitoring of Samoan media showed unusually high public interest in Starlink. The Samoa Observer placed 10 Starlink stories on the front page and many more in the first 3 pages. This level of visibility indicated that Starlink became a major national conversation. Now, the following are a few of the images of the headlines and stories that shaped what Samoans saw, what they heard, and believed during this period. Yay! Finally. Key finding number 2, evolving regulatory position. We found that the Office of the Regulator's position evolved over time. Starlink was banned in January 2024 and approved in January 2025, with several developments in between. This evolving position contributed to uncertainty about what was allowed, what was restricted, or under review. Key finding 3, communication gaps during policy changes. The analysis identified gaps in public communication. For example, after media reports that customs would seize Starlink equipment, consumers may have been surprised by the 26th of June announcement approving the import. Very limited explanation accompanied this shift, which may have contributed to confusion. Key finding 4, policy, ambiguity, and behind-the-scenes complexity. Media coverage revealed policy ambiguity and sudden shifts, but it could not show what happened behind the closed doors. Public records indicated that negotiations were taking place and that regulators were balancing multiple pressures, yet the details of these discussions were not visible in the public domain. Now, over this 13-month period, Starlink's arrival in Samoa unfolded in full public view. It captured national attention, dominated headlines, and generated strong consumer interest. At the same time, the regulatory position shifted several times, creating a fast-moving environment that was difficult to communicate clearly. The analysis shows that public communication did not always keep pace with these rapid changes. Limited explanation around key policy decisions contributed to uncertainty about what was allowed, and media reporting could only reflect what was visible in the public domain. Now, taken together, these findings reveal a communication environment under pressure, shaped by evolving policy, strong public demand, and the limits of public information. The Starlink case reminds us that when new technologies enter small markets with high public interest, clear and consistent communication is not optional. It is very essential. So what do these insights tell us about the way forward? And what lessons can guide future technology rollouts? The Starlink case shows that when policy settings shift quickly, communication becomes the critical link between regulators and the public. Clear and timely updates help people understand what is allowed, what is changing, and why those changes matter. Our findings indicate that consistent guidance, supported by coordinated messaging between regulators and the media, can reduce confusion and strengthen public trust. And as new technologies continue to enter the Pacific, communication strategies will need to be proactive, transparent, and responsive. This experience highlights a broader lesson. Effective regulation is not only about the decisions themselves, but also about how those decisions are communicated. When communication is clear, the public is empowered. When it is unclear, uncertainty fills the gap. So clarity is not just information, it is trust. And of course, these insights come with boundaries. Our study could only see what was publicly visible. The analysis identified policy ambiguity and sudden shifts in position. But media reporting alone cannot show what happened behind closed doors. So while public information suggests that Starlink and the Office of the Regulator were in frequent contact, the internal dynamics of those discussions were not accessible to us. We were also unable to examine the broader pressures faced by telecommunications regulators, such as staffing, funding, independence, or competing policy demands. And finally, this study did not include consumer experiences, so we could not explore how Samoans themselves navigated the uncertainty during this period. Now, these limitations are not caps. They are opportunities. They point directly to where deeper research is needed. Future research could unpack what happened behind closed doors, not only between Starlink and the Office of the Regulator, but also among stakeholders involved in the regulatory process. Understanding the pressures regulators face, including workload, resources, independence, and political expectations, would provide valuable context. There is also a need to explore consumer experiences. How did people navigate the uncertainty? And how many have adopted Starlink since approval? And what are their impressions as users? And finally, because direct-to-consumer technologies are likely to become more common, future studies could compare regulatory responses across the Pacific and examine how communication strategies can better support the public during periods of rapid technological change. We began today with the Va'a, the vessel that carries us across our ocean. In the same way, Samoa and the Pacific Islands are navigating a new digital ocean, one that moves quickly and demands wisdom in how we steer. As we continue guiding this digital Va'a through fast-changing waters, may clarity shape our decisions and strengthen the trust that carries our people forward. And with that, I conclude this presentation. Fiafaitupe, soifua.
Fiafaitupe, that was great, thank you. And would you all please join me in giving a warm welcome to Aleksandar Deejay for his presentation about our research in Tonga.
All right, thank you, Amanda. Thank you, everyone, for coming. So, I'm going to present on a study that we did at the end of 2024. This study basically went into Tonga, did interviews with some knowledge holders who worked within or worked with satellites, and asked them what their views were on satellite technologies, a few questions about space and space activity, questions about Starlink, questions about the disaster, the eruption that happened in 2022, and how that might have impacted some of their opinions, some of their views, and some government practices around satellites. The purpose for me, and I think each one of us, myself, Dr. Gemma Malangahu, Dr. Amanda Watson, who are part of this study, I think we each had different purposes and aims, maybe a little bit. So I'll just give my particular purpose, and that was to understand the impact of that particular eruption or that particular crisis on Tongan understandings of satellite capability and also some of the government practices that were happening at the time. So I was looking more at things like sense-making, technological imaginaries, and those types of things, but also government practices. Our methodology, like I mentioned, we went in and we did interviews. We conducted 19 interviews on the record, 2 interviews off the record. Some of those interviews were across Zoom, I think maybe 5 or so, but most of them were in person, either at the offices of the people that we interviewed or in cafes, depending on where they wanted to meet us. It was a mix of government, private, and NGO employees. So again, knowledge holders who in some way worked with satellite data, or maybe they were working on the regulatory side of things. So they had some kind of an experience with satellite capabilities. I should note we did not interview anybody in the public. So anything that I say in that regard, and I will say a few things about public understanding of these technologies, was what was shared with us by these particular knowledge holders. So we didn't actually interview anybody else, but we did get a lot of valuable insights into what the public was thinking as well. And also the interviews. Amanda and I, we did the interviews in a particular way, and also Gemma did the interviews in a particular way. So we employed more of a Western style of interviewing, where we kind of asked a question, stood back, allowed for an answer, prompted where necessary, whereas Gemma engaged in more of a Kakala interview method. I don't want to butcher or mischaracterize what that is, but my understanding is it's more about knowledge sharing so that there's an exchange between the person that is doing the interview and the people that are being interviewed. So it's more about community building and knowledge sharing. So we had a nice mix there of different methods. All right, so to go into the findings. One of the questions that we asked was, how do you rate the importance of satellites for the country on a scale of 1 to 5? The average that we got was a 4.3 out of 5, so I would say relatively high. We did have one knowledge holder that ranked it a 2.5 because they had some very valid concerns, which I'll get to in a second. But overall, 4.3 out of 5, which I thought was actually pretty high. We then followed up with questions, so why do you have that particular rating? And do you think that changed as a result of what happened in 2022 with the Hunga Ha'apai eruption? So some of the reasons that were given as for their ratings and their high ratings, like I said, most of them were around a 4 or 5. Many of them felt that it was important to complement the existing fiber optic cables, right? And that importance was demonstrated through that eruption, which essentially, I should maybe give some background on that. I don't know how many are familiar with that, but in 2022, there was the HTHH eruption, and it severed the underground cable, and there was a blackout for 6 weeks within the country. So we'll go into second in terms of Starlink's role, but satellites were employed as a way of connecting to the outside world and the outside islands. And so that was one of the reasons that they gave as to the importance of satellites for the country, was that it acted as a backup to allow for connectivity in case of these kind of emergencies. Cost and reliability was another one. That was mostly for the public itself. So for everyday Tongans, cost and reliability of satellite connectivity was a factor. And overall, I would say resiliency especially was a big factor in terms of their ratings, so that satellites were a very good complement or a very good part of, I guess you could call it maybe a resiliency package with other technologies like fiber optics to prepare and respond to disasters. And also really complemented other practices as well, which include certain social, cultural, or religious practices that Tongans employ to really handle or respond to some of these disasters. And again, yeah, that varied by group. So from what was shared with us, the public had a different kind of understanding or valuing of satellite technologies, which was mainly because it was cheaper, it was more reliable, and it was faster. And again, I'll get a little bit more into that when we go into Starlink. But some of the challenges, and this is primarily a lot of this was actually communicated to us or shared with us by one of our stakeholders, one of our knowledge holders. But inequitable access to satellites was considered a challenge, so that could be geographical inequities with the outer islands, it could have been social inequities or socioeconomic inequities, so not everybody would have access to these satellites. The one big one was unforeseen impacts of greater connectivity. So for instance, some of what was shared with us in terms of concerns might have been, what is the impact of having greater internet access for the islands, greater access to internet culture or more access to internet culture, being more online, what might be the impacts or some of the social or cultural impacts of that. The need for more awareness and education. So there was a feeling that in general, there was not a lot of awareness building, capacity building around satellites and satellite technology within the country. Maintenance was something else that was quite interesting in terms of, these particular terminals, like Starlink terminals, they require maintenance. Who's going to do that maintenance? Do we have that capability within the country? And also sustainability in terms of like waste management. What happens to these terminals once the lifespan of those terminals ends? Where do they go? What do we do with them? So those are some of the challenges that were shared with us. I'm going to go into now, here's some quotes from the knowledge holders, maybe 30 seconds or so, if you want to read some of those. Basically, the top quotes are basically reaffirming some of what I was talking about in terms of this is what changed as a result, or how we view satellite technologies since that eruption. And then the bottom ones are some of the concerns. That bottom quote was a very interesting one, I felt. That was from the one knowledge holder who did express a lot of concerns about having satellite capabilities within the country. Yeah, security of data and was also another concern that was expressed, as we see with one of those quotes. And also, one of our knowledge holders was very concerned about any kind of new criminal elements that might be introduced, whether that, through cybersecurity concerns, data breaches, identity theft, and things like that. Again, from having that kind of greater connectivity. Some people were questioning, what's the actual security of having satellite technologies, for the country, and what's being done around like consumer protections and things like that. All right, so we'll go into Starlink. So this is a timeline of Starlink in Tonga. So we had the eruption in 2022, January 15th. 1 week later, we get a nice tweet from Mr. Musk. Do people in Tonga want me to send Starlink terminals? Tongans responded on Twitter, yeah, do it, man. Send us some Starlink terminals. He said, okay. They made some formal arrangements. A couple weeks later, 50 Starlink terminals arrive in the country. Those are distributed to the outer islands, the most affected by the disruption in connectivity. The service was free, so he didn't, there was no need to connect to anything. They just got the terminals. They could use them immediately. And that lasted until the end of February, so about 2 weeks, when that cable, fiber optic cable, was restored. So between that time and then about May 2024, we had some illicit activities start. People started bringing in terminals from the outside, from other countries, New Zealand, Australia, the US, into the country. So for about 1.5 years, they were doing that, signing up for Starlink services overseas, using the roaming feature. Then the government was like, okay, well, around May 2024, stop doing this, it's not legal. It's a bit bad timing because just after that, an earthquake disrupted the fiber optic cable again. And there was a loss of connectivity to some of the islands. They again said, look, Starlink is banned officially, don't do it anymore. A lot of public uproar as a result of that. They kind of gave in. A couple weeks later, they said, look, we're going to issue a 6-month provisional license for Starlink to operate in the country. So that happened around October, November. That's when we did our study and did our interviews in the country. And then December 28, 2024, it was officially given a license, and the resellers, I think, as we saw, were TCC, Wantalk, and Digicel. So that was the timeline of Starlink in the country. So what did our knowledge holders say about that? One of the more interesting things I felt was that Starlink became synonymous with satellite. And we actually saw this even in some of our interviews with some of our knowledge holders who work with satellites all the time. We're sometimes interchangeably using the word satellite and Starlink. And we'll see a quote in a second from one of our knowledge holders that for them, what they thought, the public also viewed Starlink interchangeably with satellite capability. So the two were the same. So there was a very high and very positive brand recognition for Starlink, I would say, within the country at this time. Some of the reasons that were given for Starlink, for the benefits or appeal, again, some of that was brand recognition, but mostly it was, again, the cost, reliability, and speed of Starlink as a service. Right, so before they had Pacific, as we found out, which was a geostationary satellite, very high latency, very slow speeds, and that was the experience that the country had with satellites previously. Now they had Starlink. Starlink was operating much higher speeds. But there were also a lot of challenges that I think a lot of our knowledge holders expressed, or a lot of concerns about Starlink. There were regulatory concerns. So at that time, things were a little bit up in the air, despite the provisional license that was given. But I thought more interestingly, there was a lot of economic, social, and cultural consequences of having Starlink as essentially a satellite monopoly within the country and what that meant for Tonga. There's questions, again, of consumer protections and, again, questions of security of data. So this is just some of the quotes, again, about Starlink specifically. As you can see, one of the quotes, basically what I was just saying, that today when you say satellite here in Tonga, everyone thinks Starlink. We did ask questions, aside from communication satellites, we did ask questions about Earth observation satellites, PNT satellites, position, navigation, and timing satellites. It really depended on what the knowledge holder was doing for their work, whether or not they had any opinions to share about that. But mostly, the information we were given was about communication satellites. That was really the big topic at the time. And what was kind of interesting for me in terms of takeaways here, especially after listening to these other presentations, it really seems like that HTHH volcano eruption was kind of the start, was the entry point for Starlink into the region. So not just Tonga, but into the region as a whole. I don't know whether or not that would have still happened if Elon Musk didn't send those Starlink terminals into Tonga a couple weeks later. It's hard to say, but it does seem that was kind of the beginning point. And again, I don't know whether that was Starlink identified an opportunity within the region, right, as a result of sending these terminals to Tonga, whether that was the countries themselves that identified these are actually really helpful to have in the country. I'm not entirely sure, but it does seem like that was the starting point, was that event and then the subsequent sending of those Starlink terminals into the country. So just overall, my impressions, again, I think Gemma and Amanda were maybe looking, given our research interests and backgrounds, we all were probably looking for different things. But for me, in terms of that question about what impact, did that crisis, did that volcano eruption have on the perceptions of satellite technologies, on the practices around satellite technologies, it did seem to accelerate it. It did seem to lead to positive feelings, positive perceptions, also some very real and understandable concerns around satellite capability. But again, it's unclear to me, was it the crisis itself or was it the sending of those Starlink terminals? And I think it was different depending on who you were in the country. So I think for our knowledge holders, the people that were interviewing, the people that were actually utilizing satellite technologies, for them, from what they shared with us, it was more reaffirming the importance of satellite capability as perhaps critical infrastructure for the country. For the public, it was more about those Starlink terminals, it seemed like, and having better connectivity, having a cheaper option, and having faster internet. But there was an impact, and like I said, it seems to me like it was actually not just Tonga itself, but also for the region. And this is perhaps the beginning point. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. So, audience members in the room, you will have a chance to ask your questions in just a moment, but I have a few quick ones for the panel first. So, if you could pass that microphone to Atishnal, please, because I want to start with you, Atishnal. Just to clarify, if you could explain for the audience, please, why the different types of satellites have different latency. Maybe if you could perhaps briefly explain what latency means. It's been mentioned a few times in the presentations today, and you introduced, Atishnal, the different types of geostationary and so on. So could you explain a bit about the latency, please?
Okay, so LEO satellites, example, Starlink, they have low latency. What low latency means that the data transfer between the satellite and the transmitter is quite fast with very little time delay, and the LEO satellites are quite low at the altitude between 200 to 2000 kilometers, so distance is quite short. So the interference between the signal to the ground stations and the antenna is quite less, and you know that if you are at the high latitude in the geostationary satellite, for example, it's high. They have high latency, meaning that the data transfer is quite slow with the high noises and stuffs. So that's the main reason why LEO satellites, they have like this internet speed is quite fast, because the data transfer is fast and it has less noise.
And the signal has to transfer a shorter distance.
Shorter distance,
Yeah.
and the ionosphere is the main bug, so it has to transmit through, like if you have LEO satellites, then the distance is short, and it has to, it has very late interference with the atmosphere, ionosphere especially.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Tupe, I have a question for you. You mentioned to us in your presentation that one of the photos showed your son on the roof of your house setting up the Starlink. So could you please tell us about your family's experiences with Starlink's service?
Thank you so much, Amanda, for the question. Honest opinion, after installing Starlink at our home, I feel like I do not want to go to the office anymore because it's like I have better connection from home than being in my office. And I feel that I have done so much more work with this connection that we now have from Starlink compared to what I do when I'm in the office, because we've had a lot of problems with connection in the office. And in addition to that, I've also seen in terms of costs, expenses in my home. Before we installed Starlink, I spent almost like $100 a week trying to accommodate for my family, because I have 4 children. Everyone has got a mobile phone, and I have to pay for their credit as well. So ever since we had Starlink at home, I don't have to pay $100 a week now. It's like 139 tala monthly. And the connectivity is uncomparable. In terms of upload speed and download speed, yeah. I don't want to say more. But yes, the experience with Starlink at home is amazing. Yeah, thank you.
And just a quick one to pair. What do you do for connectivity when you're travelling between home and the office? For instance, if you have a flat tire on the road or at some other location, then how would you how do you communicate if you need to ask for help or something?
I just use mobile credits. Yeah, and then when I get to the office, I'm connected to the office with network.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And Alex, I know that your research and audience, your chance is coming in a moment. Alex, you were very interested in whether disconnection following the massive volcanic eruption in Tonga might have impacted people's attitudes. So I'm just trying to clarify what's your thinking at this time. Do you think that the volcanic eruption had any impact on people's attitudes?
Yes. So, but it depends on who you're talking to, and so what they're actually doing. So, there were some interesting, I think, responses to that. For the most part, overall, there was kind of an overarching, yes, this did really make us see, or at least reaffirm, the belief that satellites are critical for our country. There was some responses that were more interesting than others. One was really from someone that worked in disaster preparedness and response, who told us that, almost guiltily, that they felt like the eruption was a really good thing for them specifically, because it allowed them to actually learn on the fly how to access and utilize and read things like Earth observation data. So it kind of gave them the practice and the education necessary to then in the future know what to do if this happens again. But at the time, they didn't, or before that, they didn't actually know. So they were kind of learning as they went along, and they felt that was a very valuable experience. But overall, yes, there was that, they were kind of sharing with us that yes, their attitudes improved. But I think mostly it brought awareness to the public as well. Not necessarily for some of the things maybe I was interested in terms of Earth observation, things like that, but for Starlink specifically in terms of connectivity, internet access and things like that. That definitely is going to improve, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the room? We have a microphone volunteer coming round, so maybe we'll start with Denise here, please, and her neighbour has a question too, and then we can go to Michael and the other gentleman at the back. I'll guide you, Gemma, thanks.
Thank you very much. I just thank you all for very interesting presentations and well backed up by data. Thank you. I just had a couple of questions which I think are interrelated, and perhaps some of what Alex said answers some of them. But I would like to ask Atishnal and Tupe. You mentioned that there was a ban in Samoa up to 2024. Why was this banned? And Atishnal, I noticed in your tables that the French territories don't have Starlink, and I was wondering why there is this reluctance. So I would appreciate clarification on those.
Mm-hmm. Yep, sure. And we'll answer those and then we'll come to you. Thanks. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, we found that the French Polynesia does not have any, I think, does not have access to communication satellite providers. I think the main reason they are not allowing the Starlink because they are heavily reliant on undersea cables. But I am not really sure about why the government is not giving license, so that I won't be able to answer. Yeah, and yeah.
Okay, thank you for the question. Well, I'm also not sure, but this is what I think. I think it's something to do with the local ISPs, I guess.
Internet service
yeah,
providers.
the internet service providers. So I think, yeah. But I'm not so sure. I don't want to say anything that I'm not sure about.
I guess, as Tupe said, we didn't get access to the behind-the-scenes discussions, so we don't know that for sure. But thank you very much. Yes, please, your question.
Thank you, presenters. I think I'm going to guess, but I think one of the answers that we can look to is maybe because it's a new provider in the region, and so the regulators and government are still regulating transitional ways into getting how they're going to license a company that is in America rather than the ISPs on ground. I don't know, but maybe. But my question is with respect to the coverage table, I can see that it's sort of like the same coverage for the three different satellite providers, the three different groups. But I was wondering whether there was, when Starlink comes in and the accessibility on ground, whether it has disrupt traditional internet service providers, for example, Pacific, in some of the countries in the Pacific, whether it affects competition in the market. And maybe anyone in the room can provide, and yes, because you have alluded to costs as a factor with respect to accessibility. And so cost can be a factor as well, affecting the providers, traditional providers, as well as the new in-country provider with respect to internet. So that's my first question when it comes to cost and competition. And the second question is, how do you regulate data protection? Do you regulate I know we are still navigating that space, but what are the small-scale regulatory approaches we have taken? Because I can see that towards the end of the presentation, there's a remark on regulation and data protection. And so my question is, does the government and regulatory agencies regulate the licensees or the users? Yes, thank you.
Okay, I will start and then
Sorry, is that microphone working?
I'll give you another one.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you for your question. I think I will start and then Amanda can answer the rest of the part. So I think there is a competition between the service providers, and this started when Starlink came into play. And for example, like we have found that for example, in PNG, Starlink is still banned, and we have found that they are heavily relying on the undersea cables and also on Caspic. And yeah, so yeah, I can say yes, there is a competition between service providers.
Yeah, so in terms of some of the regulatory questions, it's precisely around that. It's precisely what you bring up in terms of the competition to local providers that, you know, Starlink brings. And so that was one of the main, I think, questions being asked and examined, was what kind of impact would this have on local businesses? And some of these businesses and communication businesses are also government owned, right? So what will the impact be on those? Is precisely one of those kind of questions as to why at first they didn't want to just automatically allow Starlink to operate within these countries. The other one is obviously revenue and taxation and things around that. And also consumer protections and data protection, like you're saying. Unfortunately, I don't know in terms of what's happening. I'm guessing a lot of consumer protections are falling under the, you know, for example, Tonga has a 2015 Communications Act. I'm guessing that a lot of them are still falling under that act. I don't think Starlink assumes any responsibility really for any of those consumer protections, but maybe Amanda knows a little bit more about that.
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, I'll just say that in the Pacific, the relevant ministers, the communication ministers, so the information and communication technology ministers, they have something called the ICT Ministers Dialogue, and they have met a couple of times to discuss their priorities, and they have not only the Lagatoi Declaration, but also an implementation plan, or it's called something like that. So I think that would be the place to look to see whether the Pacific leaders are actually thinking about data protection. Certainly my research on the Pacific Islands Forum materials itself, which I did for a paper on cables actually, that was published in the journal Marine Policy not too long ago. But that paper found, my research found that the Pacific Islands Forum is still really very keen on connectivity as a major priority, but also cybersecurity. So they don't necessarily mention data protection in their top two priorities, but they talk about cybersecurity, which you could think of as perhaps a slightly broader or slightly different issue, maybe. So are you wanting to ask a follow-up, are you? Because I've got other hands, so maybe we'll see how we go for time, if that's okay. All right, so we'll go to Michael Kabuni, please.
Yeah, that was a great presentation, great panel. Thank you. I think you guys answered part of the question I was going to ask is data protection. So what's the experience in countries that already have Starlink, Samoa and Tonga, that we can learn? Because I'm from Papua New Guinea, Starlink is still banned. And the government keeps shifting the reason why it's banned. So from cost, which was debunked, that was amazing, and data protection and regulations. My sense is that it's just basically protecting existing providers. There's a monopoly, state-owned, and just protecting their profits. But they've got a means to pursue this in court. They've got a power to stop it, and we're just helpless. And some of the arguments that are raised is cybersecurity, data protection, cost, and if you guys can share, your experience from Samoa and Tonga.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So at the time when we were doing the interviews, none of this was worked out yet. So a lot of this was just happening behind the scenes. We didn't have any insights in terms of what was happening around data protection, other than the fact that this was obviously a major concern for a lot of the people that we talked to, was around data protection, cybersecurity, what kind of vulnerabilities are we exposed to by having now satellites in our homes? Yeah, all those were major concerns that were articulated to us, but in terms of what was being done, we had no idea, and nothing was communicated to us in that regard at that point, other than the fact that this was a concern for the country and the people in the country. So unfortunately, I don't have any insights in terms of what's being done in terms of the practice. I don't even think anything is out there right now, from what I could see in public, in terms of how, consumer protections around identity theft or data vulnerabilities or anything like that. Like, I haven't seen anything. So I don't know if anybody else has, but that was something that constantly came up in our interviews as a concern for the people that we talked to.
Well, I guess Samoa has got its cybersecurity frameworks and data protection policies already there. And with Starlink getting their full license, I believe that now they fully have to comply with whatever laws and therefore Samoa. And I think as a user, because we've already been using Starlink for over a year now, I haven't experienced any issues or challenges to do with data privacy or data protection. So yeah, as a user for more than a year now, I see how very helpful Starlink is. And yeah, if it's used according to whatever policies, framework the Office of Regulator has prepared, and everyone that is using Starlink and Starlink itself need to comply with the security policies and the framework that has already been set out. So yes.
Thank you. We do have a question in the middle of the back row, Gemma, if you wouldn't mind going up there next, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just get you tickets, so just leave it on.
Yep, sorry. Thank you. Thank you to the panel. Yeah, my name's Liam, and I'm a student here at the ANU studying Asia-Pacific Affairs. I have two questions. One is, we heard yesterday in a panel actually here in the morning that in Fiji, the context of solar panels doesn't really work. And I was just wondering, given if during like monsoon season or something like that, is Starlink just as effective as it would be on a sunny day? I'm saying this out of ignorance, and I'm not really sure. And then the second question I have is, obviously these, I believe Alex talked about like maintenance and sustainability of the terminals, but also I was just wondering, in the discussions with like knowledge holders and other people, was there any concern about the satellites themselves? Because when they also, I presume, wouldn't last forever, and so they have a timeline when they re-enter and probably burn up over the South Pacific. And I was just looking up, and it's like, I think about 5% don't fully burn up. So I was just wondering, is there a concern about satellite re-entry as well, and how it would end up probably polluting the Pacific?
Okay, thank you for your question. Regarding your first question, you asked that there is an issue with the solar panels in Fiji, right? Yeah.
I think you were asking about the reliability of Starlink, weren't you? Yes. Yes, based on the solar panel example given yesterday. Yeah. Maybe I'll jump in while you guys are thinking. So I spoke to the late Dan McGarry, much missed, but before he passed, and he was in Vanuatu using his Starlink, talking to me in a video call using his Starlink, and he was very pleased with the general speed and usability of his Starlink, but he did say every now and again there'd be a kind of stutter, and he said he thought it was the signal changing from one satellite to another, because that's how the Starlink technology works, is that the low Earth orbit satellites, there's constellations of them, and the signal, you're in a single spot, so as the satellites move, you gradually in their orbit, your signal has to shift from satellite to satellite. So that was from talking to a user there in Vanuatu, and you're of course using it too, Per. We might go back to you as well with this question from the back there about Starlink's actual
All right,
reliability.
thank you for the question. Well, Starlink is not magic. Like any other system, it will go down somehow. But I believe in the power of having multi-layered systems, multiple paths, or resilient communication systems. Redundancy is there, so that when the other link is down, there's always your backup. But ever since I've used Starlink at home, there hasn't been any problems with the connections during rainy days, heavy rainy days, or with the wind and stuff. So the connection with Starlink is fine. But as I said before, having a multi-layered system or a resilient communication system is very important. Just like how we see the case with Tongan. When the submarine cable was cut off, who came in? So it was Elon Musk and the Starlink satellites that brought back the power line, and then they were able to communicate to the world. So yes.
And what was the second question?
Sorry. Thank you, Gemma. Is there any concern in communities about satellite re-entry and them not fully burning up?
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. So just on the previous question, I think solar weather is more of a concern for satellites than actual local weather conditions. But so in terms of whether there was any concerns about re-entry, that did not get brought up. So we did ask a number of different types of just general space questions and space activity questions. That did not get brought up, but we did have one knowledge holder, the one who rated satellite value at a 2.5, that had shared with us a lot of concerns about it. One of their concerns was also space junk and the pollution of our orbits, light pollution that comes from the satellites, and how that might disrupt, for example, indigenous engagement with the stars, indigenous community engagement with the stars. So that part was brought up, but in terms of re-entry, no, nobody mentioned that. Yeah, that's more, I think, a lot of concern for us in the space community. But
Yeah, Tupe?
Sorry, I forgot to add something to the first question. I think the other issue with Starlink, the problem that I had was that when the power is off, my connection is out. So yeah. And then Starlink will be unreliable in that case.
Yes, electricity access is an issue that impacts our communications capacity in the Pacific, that's for sure. So Gemma, we'll go down here to Virginia first, please. Thanks, Gemma.
Good exercise.
Yeah, no, you're doing a great job, thank you.
Thanks, Amanda, and thank you very much for the very insightful presentations. So I'm always interested in risk and unintended consequences of things that are originally perceived as positive. And Alex, you've already touched upon some of the concerns that people have. One area I'm working on is on online child sexual exploitation and its rise across the Pacific. So I was wondering whether in the discussions around the concerns around Starlinks or just increased connectivity as a whole, this is something that came up. And also related to that, and even beyond the risk of child exploitation online, are there any efforts to increase cyber safety awareness among the population so that people that all of a sudden are online are also aware of the risk vis-a-vis cyber scams and all sorts of pyramid schemes and things that can happen online, including cyberbullying, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Very important question. So in terms of our discussions, no one really brought that up outside of saying that what kind of new criminal elements is introduced by having more connectivity. Nobody specifically mentioned like child exploitation or anything like that. Again, the same knowledge holder that was the 2.5, right, that had all the concerns, was one of the people that was really concerned about the criminal element, right? but they didn't mention child exploitation specifically as one of those. And in terms of awareness initiatives, so again, at the time we were there, that was something that was expressed again, that there was a necessity within Tonga to have greater awareness initiatives and education initiatives with the public about, you know, what it means to have satellites, what are satellites, what does it mean to have greater connectivity, right? And again, there were a lot of some of our knowledge holders who expressed concerns for the kind of social and cultural implications of a more online Tonga, and especially for the youth. But that, no specific conversations on, child exploitation, though. I don't know.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Sorry, yes, okay, we'll do your one follow-up and then we really will end. Yeah. Oh, thanks.
So I know that in Tonga they have CERT, and then in Vanuatu we do also have CERT, and they're working together with the police.
Emergency Response Team.
And so they're the ones, I've seen in my community that they've been going around doing awareness with respect to child safety and online bullying and things like that, because we have a Cybercrime Act in place in Vanuatu. And for Tonga, I believe that they're also undertaking those actions on ground. Yes.
Yes, and Tonga Women in ICT, or TWICT, also does awareness around online safety. Yeah.
Yes, and my question is with respect to regulating Starlink. How does that, can you explain how does that go with respect to national bodies regulating the licensee?
So I think what we'll do is we'll wrap up the session and I'll have a chat with you over lunch. But the short answer is that it's done in each country differently, because some countries have an independent telecommunication regulator and some of them don't. So it's different in each country, but I'm very happy to chat more about that over lunch. So for those of you in the room, if you didn't grab a copy of the printed in brief, which is the one that Tupe, Alex and I wrote with Tupe's colleague who's in Samoa, there's some more copies on the stand here. For those of you online, you can find it in the in briefs collection on the Department of Pacific Affairs website. The conversation blog is the one that Atishnal referred to, that he and I published, and I'll put the QR code up on the screen again in a second for those in the room. And we'll have, all of us, more publications coming out about this in the future, so keep an eye out for them. But in the meantime, could everyone please give a big thank you to our three speakers? Thanks, enjoy your lunch.